Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is chapter 9 in our series entitled Shards of the Moon. Without further ado, let's get into that. Reality itself came crashing down without so much as a word or warning. Just the sudden jerk of the gears ceasing for a split second before her eyes snapped open. Her arms flailed at whatever had a hold of her, her legs kicked, and after a short moment, her brain finally came to its senses. She had kicked away the jacket, his jacket, that she had been using as a blanket in the cool night. She was left breathing fast from the nightmare, her eyes starting to take inventory of the things around her. She was still under the desk she had hidden herself under after the vault door had locked Rhada in, and now sunlight was streaming through the gate that was still locked and in place. Finally, she began to climb out from her hiding place, but with another jolt of surprise, as she expected this to be another dream when she heard a quiet beeping. The timer that had been wired into the vault door was beeping quietly, just for a few seconds, before another louder noise took over. A loud pop, a spark, and the small screen on the door lit up with random images, and then the small crank handle spun a few times, the bars leading to the roof and the floor slowly sliding back till everything clicked with a loud metallic thunk. She slowly started to approach the door, wondering what state Rhada was in at this point, but just as she was almost to the door, it started to slide open with a quiet squeak on the heavy hinges. Then a human hand wrapped around the outside, and to Madison's relief, Rhada's gaze came from around the door, but he was hiding behind the rest of it. "Rhada, are you all right?" Madison asked as she approached, almost feeling like she wanted to give him a hug. She really was worried, and that nightmare only made it worse. "I'm fine. But before you get too far, can you grab that backpack in the far corner? It has a fresh set of clothes in it," Rhada said, almost with a sheepish tone. "Huh? Oh, yeah, no problem," she said, before quickly moving and grabbing the previously unseen bag in the corner of the room. She chuckled to herself a bit as she brought it back to him and handed it off. "Thank you. Just give me a moment, yeah?" Rhada said, as he disappeared behind the still cracked door. Only a few minutes later, the familiar visage of Rhada came from behind the heavy vault door, with a happy sigh as he readjusted his clothing a bit. A smell slowly started to overtake the room. Coming from the open vault door, a bad, pungent urine smell. It almost made Madison's eyes water. "Oh, what is that?" she said, as she covered her mouth and nose with her hand, heading towards the gate for fresher air. "Well, excuse me. Nature called, and I didn't exactly have newspapers spread out in there," Rhada chuckled, before moving and unlocking, then forcing the gate up enough for them to escape into the fresh air of the late morning. Madison coughed a bit, trying to get the strong smell out of her sinuses before Rhada adjusted his watch and looked to the sunlight for anyone in the area. But they were alone for now. Apparently, the congregation hadn't tried to find them last night, but considering what they were up to and what they were up against, it's not too surprising. "So, what are we going to do now?" Madison asked, recollecting herself. "Well, first, we're going to get you back to the truck. Then, we've got to get you somewhere safe," Rhada said, stepping around as he stretched his cramped limbs. He hadn't had much moving around in the room, in all that vault. Nothing like the open spaces out here now. It was almost somehow depressing to his soul being trapped in that vault when all he wanted to do was run for the entire night. It almost felt as if he had betrayed himself somehow, and felt bad for it, despite the fact that his rational mind knew it was for the greater good. I don't even know what to think right now. Cohen was my father's friend. He was my friend since I was little. I can't believe he wanted to kill me, Madison said. Despite the warm sun, her arms crossed her chest tightly as if the word was suddenly very cold. You can blame me for that. If I had just let you go, none of this would have happened, Rhada said with a slight bit of a revelatory dismay. Stop that. You saved me. You saved my life, and Cohen, a man I trusted more than most people, wanted me dead. You're the only friend I have left, Madison said, watching Rhada with a serious look. She wouldn't let him blame himself for this. Well, if that's the case, then it's my job to see you safely. Do you have a family anywhere? Any friends outside of Boulder? I'll take you there, Rhada said, standing a little taller and for her affirmation of his deeds. The only family I have left is my brother, John, and he lives in New Reno. We haven't written to each other very recently, but I know he'll take me in if I ask, Madison explained. I know it's pretty far. That's perfect, actually. Reno is still pretty big these days, and it'd be easy to hide there. I'll get you there, don't you worry. Well, come on, the day's already burning. Let's get back to the truck. Rhada stated, the truck? It's wrecked, isn't it? I mean, when they... Madison started, before realising the emotional impact she had felt when she awoke to Cohen's voice, only to awaken and see her protector motionless, red splattering his shirt. He was shot. He looked dead. But now he didn't even seem to have the slightest bit of pain or disability. You'll see, Rhada stated. He wasn't about to exasperate, but she was thinking, or feeling at this point, it was all still very fresh to her. He had recovered from countless wounds, mortal even, due to the power of what was inside of him. But it was a costly miracle. The truck itself still sat in the high noon sun by the time they had gotten back to it, still on the side of the road, not having budged an inch. But there was one thing different as Rhada sighed, quickening his walk to survey what had been done. Madison could see what he was looking at. A length of hose sticking out the gas cap discarded, a slight stain on the ground beneath its end. Well, Rhada said, before ripping the hose out of the gas tank and tossing it into the road. I hope they got at least some of it, because they deserve whatever happens. He sighed before walking a small circle around the truck, looking for any other signs of damage. What do you mean? Madison asked. This runs on diesel fuel. A lot of people don't know the difference. It'll gum up a standard engine like glue, he said, pulling the open door. Madison started to approach the truck as Rhada brushed off the seat of sand and glass and climbed in. You think it'll start? Oh yeah, ye of little faith, Rhada said before turning the engine over in one try. The monster roaring to life yet again. All was not lost. Madison made her way around the vehicle to reclaim her seat in the seemingly invincible chariot, but as she did, she saw that Rhada was now slightly worried, looking for something in the cab. Ah, there it is, he exclaimed, before pulling out a slip of folded paper out from the console and unfurled it. It was a map, full map of the region, as it used to be. There were lots of names of places about, but on top of them were lots of handwritten markings, X's and O's. Little notes scribbled in. Was this a record of where he had been? We'll need a place to get gas. They got a lot more than I had hoped, Rhada said, his eyes perusing the map to find a suitable station he had found. You don't have gas at the base? She asked, her still foggy brain struggling to think of the right word for it. No, unfortunately. The reserve tanks there were drained a long time ago, before I got there. Practically everything left was either damaged or property locked up. This vehicle and my home included, Rhada explained. Then how did you get in? Madison asked. Magic, he said, before chuckling. It was obvious he wasn't going to give up all of his secrets. I didn't even know it was out here till you brought me there, Madison replied, shaking her head. Well, honestly, there's not a lot out here to see anymore, Rhada said, pulling his door shut after retaking his place in his seat and trying to find a decent way to see out of the remnants of the windshield. The cracks in the driver's line of sight were relatively small, so seeing the road wouldn't be much of a problem, if they could get anywhere. Again, he looked down to his map as he heard the door shut, the vehicle rocking very gently as she climbed in. Even after all that has happened, she was still trusting him. He nearly got her killed a few times now. If things hadn't played out lucky, he would have likely killed her out of his own control. But still, there she was, peering down at a map. They couldn't get anywhere near Boulder again, and that was the closest for the gas. There's a station just on the other side of Las Vegas. I remember passing by it a while ago. Let's hope it's still running, Rhada said, before folding up the map. He knew the way well enough not to need it, at least at this point. The drive through the sea of metal this time was much slower, more deliberate to take advantage of the slight decline they could make of it, but just barely. The Hummer chugged in its idle down the highway, trying to get the best speed for the gas that they had. By the time they neared the gas station they were destined for, the sun was already high in the sky. A lot of their travelling day got burnt doing this crawl. If they could get gas here, as the Hummer coughed and spat at its lack of fuel, they could make it to New Reno by nightfall. If not, they were sunk. Final cough from the engine before it putters out, and with just enough speed and inertia to bring the heavy vehicle careering towards the gas station, then up to one of the pumps with a quiet squeak of the brakes as they stop next to the pump. It looked like they were in luck. Someone was in the office and lights were on inside. They had power, but did they have fuel? Rhada got out quickly and rounded the back of the vehicle just as the attendant had come out the office, both of the men stopping just as they reached a fair distance from each other. There wasn't much trust between customer and provider anymore, as if there was before, but at least most business transactions before didn't have guns at the ready on regular occasions. "What's your business?" the attendant asked, with a drawl in his voice. "Just need fuel for a trip before the day's out," Rhada responded. "What kind?" he asked. "Diesel," Rhada responded quickly. "Full tank if you got it." "Pay?" he asked. "Trade," Rhada responded with finality. That's when the attendant broke from the back and forth to take a moment and think. His eyes peered over the vehicle, then over to his cute passenger, who was looking out the window to the transactions happening. A smile of rotten, missing teeth, a leer almost. Rhada's eyes shifted to the side, seeing what he was looking at before his arm crossed and he moved standing in a line of sight between the two. "Too high," Rhada responded. The look on the attendant's face noted disappointment, but he wasn't past bargaining yet. Apparently, something else had his eye, and Rhada figured out what quickly, as he drew his rifle out of his back and held it in his hand, presenting it to him from a distance. "This plus one clip," Rhada offers. "3 clips," the attendant haggles. "2 clips, you'll never see a cleaner gun," Rhada raises. "Deal," he reluctantly agreed. "Ammo, gas, gun," Rhada states. "Uh-huh. Gun, gas, ammo," the attendant restates. Rhada sighs quietly before pulling the clip out of the weapon, then pulling the bolt a few times to clear any rounds chambered, but there were none. Rhada approached and turned the butt of the weapon towards him, handing it to the outstretched hand that took it with speed. Afterwards, he slung it into his back before he walked back into the office and hidden a key on his till. The pump squealed to life with electricity before the attendant came back out and took the nozzle, starting to fuel the quite thirsty tank. Rhada strolled about, keeping half an eye on the attendant while he did, but he wasn't just killing time or taking in a view. Something was off here, something that was bothering him. Smells in the air weren't right. This close to Vegas, It was almost expected that he'd catch a few whiffs of monsters in the air, but all the smells mixing together made it overall much more dense, as if there were dozens of them nearby. And that just couldn't be. He continues his walk, trying to figure out the scents he was picking up, looking down to the fine desert sand. Tracks. So many of them that they had overlapped countless times in all directions. A lot of activity happened here very recently. The attendant was almost definitely human, but as Rhada continues his slow walkabout, not changing his pattern with realization, he starts to look out to the buildings in the distance. Dots of movement. Nothing else much, but he could make out visually from his distance. But something was definitely there, and there were definitely a lot of them. Were they being followed? Watched? Slowly, he made his way back towards the truck. The attendant had been watching him to make sure he didn't try anything funny. Soon as he stood and leaned against the truck being fueled, he casually asked as possible, but he did turn his head to him and spoke slowly, so that only they might hear above the pump's thrum. I know that you're human, and I know the dozen in the buildings beyond us are not. After you're done, take the gun and go inside. Lock the door, and we'll leave and try to draw them off, Rhada instructed quietly. The attendant had a look of shock on his face, and only managed to blink once at the words he was being given. He didn't even say anything, only stared into Rhada's eyes for a long moment before slowly turning his head back to the pump. Its clicking in the handle from the full tank almost scaring it out of his hand. Rhada rounded the truck, keying it open and grabbing the 2 extra clips of ammunition owed, and gave them to the attendant who had already started making his way back to the office. He didn't look like he could much fight, but hold a door closed and hold a gun. That anyone could do. Rhada pushed the clips into his hands before turning and taking the first of the few steps back to the truck, when he heard a familiar sound. The sound of the clip finding the magazine well, the sound of a practiced hand retracting the charging handle, the sound of it quickly chambered, and a trained weapon. It occurred to Rhada that there were some truly despicable folk left in the world, even after most of mankind had been eradicated. But as he turned, seeing a man standing with a proud stance, holding a weapon at shoulder and trained right on him, he knew that something even deeper was there, pushing his moves. I saw the pistol, take it out and put it down, nice and slow. The drawl remained, though more confident now. Was he going to rob them? Was he thinking that maybe Rhada was making the monsters up? There were tons of explanations at this point, none of which seemed to fit exactly how he was acting. You don't want to do this, Rhada stated, his body staying stone still. He would only draw it if he needed to. Take it out and put it down, the attendant repeated. Rhada knew the rifle wouldn't kill him. It would hurt, sure, but by the time the second round would be coming his way, Onryo would be out and taking her sweet vengeance. But then something happened that Rhada didn't expect, something he wasn't used to being in the equation. The rifle came to its point to his left, and he knew instantly where it was. With a bloom of heat in his face, blood rushing to the side of it as if to tell him that there was a weakness there, Madison was out of the vehicle, now standing in harm's way. Now! He yelled. Rhada, with a quiet sigh and slow hand, reached back and removed the heavy pistol from its holster, and bent at the knees as slowly lowered it to the ground. Footsteps coming in all around them, moving shapes on the horizon, dozens out of the buildings to encircle them. All the smells he knew to hate, but they had been masked somehow. Not fully, but enough to at least throw off just how many of them there were. I don't know who you are, stranger, but you're good. Too good. I reckon I know someone who might like to meet you, the attendant says with a rotten smile. Wow. Hope you guys are enjoying this series. Thank you ever so much for all the likes and shares and wonderful comments. Of course, please do like and share again. And if you haven't subscribed to Dead Man Talking, please do smash that subscribe button to keep yourself all up to date with all the DMT content. As ever, folks, remember, be safe, not sorry.